A large crowd of people greeted the luxurious carriage with 4 white and luxurious horses very joyfully. Flowers flying from the sky filled the atmosphere with tenderness. In the carriage sat a beautiful blonde lady. Folding her arms, she mouthed that she would definitely be on her own now. As they left the carriage, the servants held the girl's hand, but Madame thought of the fact that she would now be the holder of the title unhappy bride. There was only calmness on her face, but something was still wrong. But the girl was unhappy only because she had tied her life to a man who was nicknamed Hades, the god of death. She stood confidently and looked toward her husband. Her man was the sun in the empire. He was an object of eternal glory in Oriole. The husband of this exquisite milady was Emperor Cathar Ispirian himself. He was a statuesque man with dark hair and pale white skin. The girl began to remember the events that made this wedding happen. The girl herself did not want to take part in this event. If one day she had not overdone it with alcohol, she completely fell into her thoughts and remembered that day. She sits with a mug of beer in her hands and says that she is not guilty of the fact that the 30-year-old man is a fool, and in general, he does not know elementary things such as where the sun rises from. The girl thought it was absolutely not normal. While the other men looked at her like an exhibition, she mumbled to herself under her nose, repeating inarticulate words. The girl stood frightened and bewildered as the man shouted into her eyes, saying that the hill of Andir was the western part of the imperial palace. Pausing, he went on to say that with how the sunrise could even be seen from there if the tallest building on the entire continent was located to the east. The girl only let out a few whimpers and began to think in her mind that he didn't know anything anyway. He wasn't a wizard. She comforted herself with the fact that he didn't have any magic dust with which he could change the place of sunrise. But still, she didn't believe his words. The reason she is living this lifestyle now is that she was dumped by a man who hadn't seen her in 10 years, all because she was being a know-it-all and arguing all the time. One day she mentioned that the sun rises in the east, and he broke off their engagement and didn't want to see her again. The girl shakily shouted to him that even the emperor couldn't do such a thing, and she didn't notice that it wasn't her thoughts and she was speaking aloud. The man replied that she was saying all the right things, scratching his chin thoughtfully. The girl blushed and was completely bewildered and angry, wondering how long this subject had been sitting near her. She had not noticed him, and what he had forgotten here. In her mind, she thought he didn't look like a man with bad intentions, but she didn't understand how it was that she had just gotten off her drink, and there was already a man sitting across from her. She glared angrily at him while he was going through something in his hands. The man handed her a plate of food and told her to eat. The girl was surprised but accepted him because he bought her food and treated her, so at least he is not so bad, and at any rate cooler than her ex-fiancé. The girl was very happy eating the treats, drinking beer. The girl thought that she would like to go back to the academy, but she already had her doctorate, so it wouldn't work. But in a flash, she switched to the fact that she didn't want to deal with any men, and that she didn't want to date candidates or get married, and in general, she didn't want to be romantically involved with anyone. A lot of people just don't deserve it. The man stood idly by with a calm face and in a monotonous voice, so as not to make the girl uncomfortable, asked her if she would look for someone else, because there were many potential suitors. The girl shouted back that she did not want anything. The girl did not digest old men. She considered them the worst creatures. The girl's eyes glazed over, and she continued to whimper. But suddenly she said that if she were to marry, she would like her husband to be smart and good, and mentioned a certain Yodel, saying that her future husband might not be as good as Yodel. The man didn't understand and asked who Yodel was. The girl only added that he was smart and attractive and suddenly interrupted the sentence. Suddenly, the girl looked at him and realized that she couldn't really see his face since he was wearing a hood, but she still found him quite attractive. Suddenly, the girl's eyes began to blur. The man got worried and asked her if she was okay. She seemed very drunk to him. He called out to her, but in her mind it was just his voice, and she liked it. She looked into his amber eyes and thought they were quite beautiful. The girl decided that next time she would have to pick a definitely attractive man, but still she didn't want to be picky. But she really did want him to be nice enough. The girl started to fall asleep right on the table, and the mysterious stranger tried to wake her up. He told her that this was no place to sleep, but the girl denied it. She said she didn't care and she was tired, so she would sleep here and now. In her mind, the girl thought about how cool it would be if she relaxed with him over a drink every now and maybe not even with him if he was bi like this man. Suddenly, the man touched the girl's hair and asked if she was okay. He looked really scared. And it did get to the girl that the perfect candidate was standing right in front of her, handsome, caring, and also listening to me. He's really good. Suddenly, the girl jumped backwards away from him. She took his hand and shouted at him to wait. The man asked in bewilderment what she was doing, and the girl threw him a question about his marriage. The man obviously did not expect such a question and asked the girl what the question was. The girl shone with joy and added a question about his personal life, whether he had a favorite woman and whether he was engaged. The man was very much embarrassed by such questions, and he bowed his head a little, blushed, and answered in a drawn-out manner that he had no one. The girl smiled, squeezing his hand even tighter, her eyes filled with admiration. She said it was glorious, and he was perfect for her, and proposed marriage. The man froze with shock. He clearly didn't think he would be asked to marry by a strange woman in a bar, and he asked again. And the girl said even louder that she wanted him to marry her. The man still stood in shock, and suddenly he shyly lowered his head and looked down sadly. The girl, not waiting for his answer, began to get angry, blushed, and angrily confronted him about how it was that he didn't want to. The man quietly replied to her that it wasn't that he didn't want to. He paused and added that it was strange that she didn't care about the status of the man she wanted to tie her like to. The girl only interjected. She stood there with a strange feeling, because she thought that this pub was only frequented by the disguised nobility to drink in secret to have fun. She was confused because she couldn't believe he could be a commoner, but there was still no, for nobles, sign, but the drinks were expensive. Suddenly, the girl came out of her thoughts and asked him if he was a commoner. The man froze and looked down, and she began to wonder if she had hurt his feelings, for he had been so kind to her. Without waiting for an answer, a smile appeared on her face, and she told him that even if he was a commoner, it was no big deal because she already had a title. And so that he wouldn't worry, she added that it didn't make any difference to anyone if he was rich or poor. The man kind of calmed down, and the girl, to cheer him up, said that he would join her family and would also be a man of status. She decided to share her thoughts and said that she should get married soon and have an heir because she was the only child in the family. The man asked her what kind of heir and if she was in a hurry, and she switched to another topic and started talking about her former man and what a bastard and stupid he was. The girl added with a smirk that he looked like a carp, and suddenly she remembered a scene from her life where she was sitting at the table with her so-called soulmate and tolerated his bad attitude towards her. He was saying that she was very lucky to have him, acting like a narcissist, and the girl was only giving in and agreeing. The girl got serious and folded her arms and said that children inherit their parents' traits without choosing their looks, and her ex-husband was bald. She said that all her efforts went to zero, because no matter how much she wanted to, an exceptionally small carp could not be born from a bald carp. The man listened intently. The man gulped and stood silent, and the girl just kept saying that it was all good, but the problem was that her parents might not accept him. But she told him not to worry, because they would probably agree to the wedding and realize that she had made the best choice possible if they just looked at his face. The man only stood silent while the girl glared menacingly at him. The girl was disappointed and realized that most likely the case will not work out and she will have to continue to meet with the next representatives of the nobility. The girl looked at the glass of beer and decided that you didn't want any and yelled that she was going to get drunk to death and quickly turned the glass over. The man tried to stop her and yelled stop. The girl put the glass on the table and said she felt great and she was going home. The girl was wasted. She also added that she would postpone all meetings with potential suitors until the day after tomorrow and all kinds of things tomorrow. The man got worried and tried to stop her. He told her that something might happen to her on the way back or she might meet dangerous people who might hurt her. The girl turned to him and told him not to get smart and to sit quietly. She had already started to turn around, saying that it was her life and she could say what she wanted. The girl grabbed the guy by the collar and dragged him toward her, saying he was covering his countenance. his hood came off. And she added that he was the most suspicious of everyone in this bar. And in a menacing voice, she asked him if he understood her. And in her mind, she thought that he was very handsome, and it was very strange that he hid his beautiful and very handsome face. And that in fact, he was 10 times better than Yodel. The girl was daydreaming looking at him and didn't even hear what he was saying. She was very sleepy and decided it didn't matter what he was saying. She reached out to him and wanted to say something to him. She mumbled something and immediately with a thud, she fell to the ground and passed out. Elier woke up in her bed in the morning. As the maid opened the curtains, she asked her mistress how much she had drunk. Elier scratched her head and said that her head hurt and her head was very sore. After a few seconds, not contentment came out of her mouth. She said she didn't drink much, just like 5 cups. The girl was badly hungover and she was aching to remember something, but there was no way she could. The maid asked her mistress how much she had drunk that night, and the girl only replied that her head was splitting as if someone were pounding her wretched skull with a hammer. Mrs. Ellie said she's been drinking a little bit. It's just the way it is because she hasn't seen alcohol in a long time. The maid was surprised and served her water with honey and decided to make a joke. That she wanted to look at her bill to see if she was lying or if she actually drank that little. The girl asked in bewilderment if the check had been delivered to her and how she even got home, because she couldn't remember anything. The maid asked how come she didn't remember. The maid asked how she remembered it and said that one of the beer house workers had brought it, and that the man had been clever enough to go in the back door, because if the countess had seen it, she would have been in trouble. He brought her on his back and asked her to take her away from him, and the maid stood there in shock because she couldn't believe it was her mistress. But the good news is she didn't lose her wig on the way here. The girl sat in the carriage and thought that now she understood why the guests of the pub were asked to write down their names. It was in case they had to deal with drunken customers like her, but she wondered why she hadn't been billed. She began to worry that she had made a mess of things and that the full cost of the damage had not yet been calculated. She couldn't come to any good conclusions. She was scared because she didn't remember anything. Still, the girl decided to forget it. She decided not to worry, because if she had done something stupid, she would soon find out about it. Suddenly, a beautiful girl with red hair named Laurent called out to her. Ellie was happy to see her too and started running in her direction. When Ellie ran to her friend Laurent, she said she was dressed very nicely and asked if she was dressed for the event. Ellie in turn thanked her for inviting her. Laurent further added that Ellie had a direct hand in the organization. The girl smiled, but in her mind, she was thinking about the fact that she had spent the entire night drinking until she passed out. Laurent asked her what happened with Count Pasita, and the girl said that he broke their engagement. Laurent was very curious and decided to ask her how it ended, and the girl replied that they hadn't seen each other for 10 years, so nothing happened. Laurent was surprised, and Ellie only added that they weren't right for each other. So that's when they split up. Ellie also said that the proposal to break up came from the Count, and then she noticed that Laurent was looking at her with a suspicious look. And then the girl began to realize and asked if the Count was telling everyone nasty things about his ex-wife. Laurent started talking about the complex, which refers to his lack of intelligence, and the girl was very surprised because she didn't know about it. In her head, she wondered how it was that he had such complexes being a count. Laurent continued to talk about the rumors that were spreading. She started to say that the Count's family worked in the trade, so all the members spoke at least 3 languages. The girl paused for a moment and said that there were also rumors that he was engaged to Ellie just to use her intelligence, because the information that she was the youngest freshman in the academy and the first in her class in terms of points was even printed in the newspapers. Ellie was really pissed off, and she shouted the question why he broke off the engagement. Laurent replied that she didn't know, and the girl decided to tell the story of how he had told her that the sunrise that could be seen in the west from the hill of Ander was breathtaking, and she had simply replied that the sun rose in the east, and he dumped her because of that. Laurent replied that it sounded like she was trying her best to indulge in everything, but he was a fool and didn't want her to get smart. Ellie was furious and said that she kept quiet a lot, no matter how much nonsense he was talking, and Laurent tried to support her and said that he was looking for a woman who was smart and listened to him. but she wasn't, and it was probably a good thing they broke up. Ellie thought about how there was no woman in the world who would listen to a stupid man. Lauren tried her best to support her, telling her not to be so angry, and that even if the Count was spreading rumors about her, it was nothing, because the people of the capital were much more interested in other topics. In confusion, Ellie asked what the topic was, and Lauren replied that the Emperor had announced his wedding. In Ellie's mind, everything was somehow mixed up. She thought how it was that the Emperor was getting married. She thought that he had been single for a long time, although she thought that it was none of my business and she had a lot of problems without it. Ellie returned home and the maid asked in surprise why she was so fast. The upset girl said that the hostess of the event was busy and she didn't know anyone else there. In fact, the girl was very angry that the Count was spreading rumors and that she was not a genius and she was rejected by the Count. She told herself that if she had stayed even a minute longer, she would have turned everything upside down. Ellie asked the maid to bring her the latest issue of the newspaper. She thanked the maid and told her to go, and if she needed anything she would call her. She started to read. The first chapter was about who the unlucky bride was who had fallen into the net of Hades. It told her that after 7 years on the throne, the Emperor had finally announced his marriage, and that for some reason a cold-blooded and cruel ruler could make such an unusual announcement. The identity of the bride has yet to be established. The girl read and thought that marriage to the Emperor sounded like a real-life nightmare, and she wondered how such a thing could write newspapers. She sympathized with the bride-to-be, but suddenly her attention was attracted by an inscription that not so long ago the Emperor was seen in the company of a woman with whom he spent time in secret, and it seems that since then no other people have not entered in any way into his circle of communication. As a consequence, that lady is most likely his future bride. The girl read it with great interest and wondered who it could be. It also said that the girl's face was not visible, but only that the lady had long pink hair with tips the shade of light blue sky. She didn't know what that meant at first and thought it couldn't be her color. It was fashionable to wear makeup now, and Ellie decided to give it a try. She did pretty well and really liked her hair, but it was a wig. Suddenly, she threw the paper and hid it, being in the denial stage. She couldn't believe it was about her. She had hoped to the last minute that it was a mistake. Then she started laughing and looked at her hair and started talking about how she was definitely wrong. A maid came into the room and told her to get a grip because she most likely still hadn't sobered up yet. She began to remember how after the engagement broke up and she was angry, she had simply put the wig on before she left, and she wasn't wrong about the color. She had asked Jerry to dye it the color she wanted to. Allie began to remember all her trips to the bar and remembered that Jerry had visited the pub and brought a receipt that the bill had been paid. But now she hadn't been to the capital in 10 years and didn't know anyone in it, and most likely her bill was being paid by the man drinking with her. She looked at the bill and suddenly thought it might be the Emperor. Suddenly, the girl remembered that Jerry was to prepare her newspaper clippings about the day the empire was founded. Ellie looked at the clippings and denied that it was possible. She began to remember him telling her not to fall asleep here, how he tried to help her and called a crew to take her home. Ellie went on to tell him that she wasn't kidding when she told him they should get married, adding that she didn't care about his status or anything, and that she was smart despite being drunk. The girl promises him that if he marries her, she promises to make him happy. Ellie sat tensely and thought about what she had done. Ellie sat and read an article about who the woman the Emperor would marry was. Journalists have undertaken every possible investigation, but no one has ever been able to find information because there are no unmarried ladies with such brightly colored hair in the Empire. Ellie threw down the newspaper and realized that it was definitely about her. Ellie realized that she was finished because she couldn't remember anything, and the newspapers were only talking about the Emperor's wedding. She decided to face the truth, but she couldn't do that because she was very drunk that night, and she justified to herself in every way that she couldn't talk to the Emperor like that, even if she were under a degree. She said some pretty derogatory things to him, such as how he was her servant, if he had experience in the field, and that she liked his service. And the Emperor told her everything was fine and cooked food for her. The girl said that no one cared about his status because she already had the title. She was bragging about her status to the Emperor and told him he looked much prettier without the hood. She envisioned their future children telling him not to worry because their children would be very beautiful. She hugged him and told him that he could be happiest with her. Ellie blamed herself for hitting on the Emperor. Mistress Ellie screamed and realized she had a pretty good memory as she remembered every little thing and cursed her tongue for saying such things. She cried into her pillow and blamed herself for what she had done, why she had gotten so drunk, and why she had said all this to the Emperor in the first place. She was more concerned about her shameful behavior than her marriage to the ruler. Still, the girl decided it wasn't her fault here because the Emperor could have introduced himself. Ellie revisited the articles again and realized that they speculated about who the bride might be since her identity was unknown to anyone because the Emperor had only announced the imminent wedding without any details. For a second, the girl thought about how handsome he was, but she started looking for excuses for what happened and suggested that maybe he was anxious before his wedding and decided to unwind and just bumped into her. Ellie decided not to give in to the situation so as not to rush all possible ridiculous consequences. She made sure that he would not marry her because she was a drunken woman and decided that she would write a letter to the academy saying that she agreed to take the professor position offered to her. The girl thought that she would have a good time there, and she would never meet any other carp-like men of the nobility. Suddenly, Ellie was called by her mother. When her mother came into the room, she was shocked and asked what the mess was. She thought of Ellie taking her anger out on those newspapers. Ellie tore up the paper and asked what it was about. The girl began to shake off the remnants of the papers and asked what had brought Mother here, and she replied that she had some wonderful news and wanted to tell it. Mom said that the Emperor was inviting all unmarried adult girls to his palace for a ball. Ellie thought for a second that he had never given a ball on this day before. In the letter, it was written that all unmarried women were obliged to appear, and the girl was puzzled, thought why the Emperor holds this year's ball, and even with the condition of compulsory attendance. She was distraught over the breakup of her engagement. And here's the score. Mom said this event might be a good opportunity to find a better beau than that pot-bellied count. Mother suggested that Ella buy a new dress, an exquisite one that would help draw attention to her. She suggested that she go shopping tomorrow. The girl thought about the fact that she would still like to get married, just she doesn't like fools. In no time at all, she came out of her thoughts and told her mom she was in. A young man was thrown at the door of the Emperor's palace. He didn't understand why he was being treated like this. He was covered in blood and begged for answers as to why he was being held here. The Emperor sat in his chair and told him that he had all the evidence against him about his perfect murder. His Majesty decided to ask the criminal about the documents in his safe. The guy was very frightened. The Emperor only laughed at him because he was stupid and didn't burn the evidence. The Emperor told him that the guy was just a bug that messed with his nerves and that he was the Emperor and could do whatever he wanted. The ruler looked at him and smiled. He told him he was a complete fool who made the Emperor have to bend the knee. Guy asked with complaint over him, but no one wanted to listen to him. The Emperor was giving orders to his servants. He told them to bring all the evidence to his house and the safe to the second floor so he could check it. He also ordered his relatives, including illegitimate children, to be hunted down. A subordinate said that perhaps some noble conservatives would be against it. The ruler stomped his foot and said that the supreme power in this country was definitely in his hands because he was the emperor and no one could speak against him because he would be a traitor. Anyone who raises a protest will be eliminated. The emperor said that there would be no exceptions and that all those who had even a drop of this criminal's blood in them were obliged to disappear from the face of the earth because any of them could use their lineage as an excuse to revolt against him. His Majesty came to the dressmakers and they showed him his outfit. They said they had read that the young lady's hair would be bright, so there was difficulty in selecting a color of clothing for her. He asked them if they had read the yellow paper that went for a lockable statement under the pretext of informing the public with bogus information. The emperor said the lady was blonde. The maid chose a dress and offered different options, but mistress didn't like any of them. Jerry showed Ellie a sparkling dress, but the girl rejected it because it was so sparkly. The maid said that the mistress could not reject all options. For the girl, all these dresses were overkill, but the subordinate replied that nowadays everyone wore clothes in this style. Jerry replied that in that case, Mrs. would have to go and pick one out at the boutique. Suddenly, Jerry said she had an idea. The girl liked the numbers she suggested, using the method of elimination by removing all the dresses she didn't like and then making a choice from the remaining ones. Mistress thought that wasn't a bad idea because she had to at least have some choice. Suddenly, the girl noticed the all-black dress and said it was perfect and that she wanted it. Jerry said it was a morning dress and she couldn't wear it. Ellie got embarrassed and said she didn't want to stand out at the ball. The gentlewoman said that she would look for her husband, but not now, and the maid replied that she would let that conversation pass her ears for now. Jerry told her to transfer, and she went to look at the boutique. Ellie decided it was time to stop whining. It was inevitable anyway, so she went to look around too. She heard the women also marveling at the emperor's decision about the ball. Ellie wondered too, because the emperor despised events where there was a rain of noise. There was only talk of the ball, and what was going on seemed strange. The ladies sat around the table and talked about the emperor preparing for the wedding, but that such a bride no one knows, and one of them was frightened by such a sudden decision, but they were still excited about the ball. Ellie looked through the shop windows. She saw a beautiful pendant, and in the background there was talk of Baron Fiesel's murder. The girl was surprised to hear that the emperor had killed someone at a social gathering. The ladies wondered what Baron Fiesel had done that the emperor had decided to kill him, but they immediately passed over the subject because this had happened before. He had even gotten rid of the nanny who had taken care of him since he was a baby. Ellie overheard all these conversations and didn't understand what they were saying and why everyone was so afraid of him. She thought about how it's very unfair that no one has the right to express their expression because they will be executed immediately, and she thought about why no one knows and dares to revive him, and there seems to be a problem. Suddenly, her musings were interrupted by a maid asking what she was doing here. The girl was frightened because she thought that the mistress had run away, and she was just hiding behind the column of the mistress of all things. Allie excitedly asked if she had picked out a dress. Jerry said that she had talked to Sport and she had said that she would be willing to customize a dress for her, so she decided to see if she would like one. The girl started pushing her maid and saying that they had to go right away. The maid asked her why they had to go so fast, but she only said that they had to hurry up. They would finish quickly, and then they would have a good snack. And the women continued to talk about who would be his bride. In the newspapers wrote that the wife could be a foreigner, but they thought that they did not need to find out because it would not change anything. Puzzled because before the emperor said that he would never get married, and everyone was curious about what made him change his mind, and was curious how long his new wife will be able to live with him under the same roof. Ellie had gathered all the criticism of the emperor, everything about the emperor's life and rumors about the emperor, and she wanted to find out the details of his life. She had to find out more about him. She learned that the current emperor was originally the third prince and the youngest son of the emperor. He was no different from the others. But already at the age of 15, he had become a knight and reached the position of captain solely because of his abilities. The girl wondered how such a thing was even possible. After the destruction, he completed the maps of the Western Mountains and returned to the capital. Everyone talked about his expedition to destroy the demons of the Western cities even during her time at the academy, but she had no idea that he would be the current emperor. After reading this, Ellie couldn't tell he was human at all because he seemed to belong to a completely new species. She thought that if he was human, then these achievements would be really promising for the pretender to the throne. But before he ascended the throne, a great many strange things happened. A year after the current emperor returned from an expedition, the crown prince died as a result of a fall. And the next year, the second prince died due to an accident. And Mom moves to a mansion in the south, where she dies of illness. And how that happened, Ellie didn't understand. It's clear to everyone that these deaths have only benefited the emperor, and perhaps that's why the nobles continue to keep quiet even when he acts recklessly. They're just afraid of him. It's strange that he would execute someone publicly. A truly tyrant emperor would never allow a drunken woman to behave like this with him. She wondered why she'd done all this. The girl fell on the bed and said that it was all because of the carp, and if he was cute, it would be possible to try to beat the crap out of him. And if she hadn't gone out drinking because of that man, then she wouldn't have gotten drunk and molested the emperor. Still, she thought it was an honor to have a mug with the emperor. Her brain refused to work any further. Ellie decided that she would just keep a low profile at the ball and leave without attracting any attention. Even though she was wearing a wig, the emperor would still have no trouble recognizing her, if he was perceptive enough. But he had gone from the third prince to the current head of state, so he was a very strong man. Ellie decided that the emperor just keeps his image of a tyrant deliberately because he would not allow the newspaper to write such nasty things about him, and everyone would be deprived of any opportunity to criticize him because all the critics would have been executed long ago. He is prudent enough to have more power than others, and such a dissemination could be dangerous, so she had better not do anything about it. The emperor, sitting in his chair, said that he would now wear rings on his ring finger, and this was news to him. He thought about the fact that if he could simply tie her to him with a simple ring, he would have taken that chance a long time ago. Ellie's subordinate asked her to choose a hairstyle of her own choosing, to which Ellie readily agreed. As she continued to do her hair, the subordinate noticed the high degree of participation of the miss and was greatly relieved. During the conversation, she noticed that Madame Rosso was also inspired by Ellie's request to reduce the number of ribbons, ruffles, and glitter. The atelier workers also noticed Ellie's weariness with ribbons and ruffles. Miss at the same time was all out of place. There was something she didn't like about the look. Ellie asked Jerry if she looked more attractive than usual, but her subordinate thought it was a joke. Laurent complimented Ellie on her delightful dress and emphasized that among all the unmarrieds she would stand out the most. Ellie wanted an inconspicuous dress to stand out less than inspired Madame Rosso to perfect the outfit several times over. There were many unmarried ladies gathered for the ball, more than Ellie had realized. She was surprised to see so many single girls in her empire. All the unmarried girls were invited, engaged as well in that number. After a short dialogue between Emmy and Laura, they came to the conclusion that the number of guests was quite logical. Laurent couldn't chat with Madame any longer as there were new guests to meet. Emmy asked her to thank Laurent's fiancé for escorting her to the event hall. In parting, Laurent wished Ellie would find a dazzling boyfriend, but Madame wanted to be as inconspicuous as she could. Ellie wanted to leave the ball as soon as the emperor appeared. That was the rules of the event. While waiting, the people kept talking about how the emperor was a tyrant and how bad he was. But as soon as he appeared in front of them, they all got closer to him to get a better look. Ellie saw the emperor and decided to drink a little to have a reason to leave the building. Surprisingly for the madam, the alcohol tasted fine. His Majesty the Emperor of Roofers, Emperor Kater Experian, has been announced. Ellie sees how big the difference is between the way things are written about the emperor in the papers and the way things really are, although it's quite normal. Ellie was still shocked by her proposal to the emperor that she jokingly thought about writing a dissertation on it. Madame could not understand why the emperor would have a ball in honor of her coming of age, so she wanted to hear his explanation. Ellie is once again surprised by the turn of events. The emperor did not say a word and the ball began. It seemed strange to her, since all the costs fell on the shoulders of taxpayers, and no one was even slightly interested in the imperial treasury. Ellie feels out of place because she doesn't like to attend such events. She looks for girls with more noticeable elements of clothing and found a necklace, which is much more noticeable than the whole image, and Ellie herself. The more she watched, the more girls noticeable she found herself. Ellie was surprised at the emperor's indifference to all this, and she noticed that he had fallen asleep. Madame seeing this as an opportunity to leave the ball more quickly. But still coming out, Ellie could not resist the tantalizing taste of the emperor's wine. Still, it is delicious. Madame seriously considered asking the servants about the origin of this drink. The emperor did notice Ellie, and was happy to see that she liked the wine so much, but she couldn't be allowed to get drunk. The emperor ponders whether to stop her. Ellie still stopped and decided to walk towards the exit, but then she heard a voice that made her feel goosebumps all over her body. It was the culprit of her recent drunkenness, and he decided to tell the story of an emerald necklace that cost a lot of money and only recently appeared within the country. He, as always, was not very handsome, and the necklace was tasteless. Even a blind man would see that. It is strange that such a young girl is standing near this something. He wasn't a benchmark at all. Ellie looked at the girl beside him and sympathized with her. Everyone who was not around him tried to flatter him in any way because he was from the Fechida family, a fairly wealthy family. Ellie was annoyed with Kark fetish, but was a minor obstacle, so she decided to make a quick exit while he talked some guest teeth. At the most unexpected moment, Kark noticed the lady and exclaimed that he recognized the hair for the girl who had humiliated his girlfriend seemed to him smug because she was more educated than the other girls. Karp asked directly if Ellie was trying to run away from the event in the beginning, drawing the attention of many to her. Ellie was very annoyed with the man, but she didn't show it, so she refuted Fred's assumption by arguing the high level of security of the event. Ellie remembers her childhood, when she was an easy child, and asked her parents to give her a book for her birthday because it was the only thing she was interested in. She excelled in her mental abilities far more than her peers. She even got into the academy, where the best scholars had a hard time getting in, and managed to be one of the best students. Parents engaged Ellie to the Count against the will of Miss, because the Count is much older than her, and not handsome at all, but no one cared. The Count's family is rich and influential. Then Ellie learned the bitter truth that no matter how talented a woman is, society will deny this fact in any way. Ellie looks at the Count, who has not changed a bit for the better. The Count asked her boldly if she was accompanied to the ball or if she was hiding because her lover was away. Ellie didn't know how to answer that question, so she assured the Count that it wasn't his concern. My lord was so angry that he squeezed his companion's neck so hard that she cried out. My lord had no more arguments and decided to brag about the necklace, saying that Ellie could have had it if she had been his wife. Ellie didn't like it all. The Sora was nothing to her, but then the Count cried out that Ellie's behavior was outrageous because she was showing herself as strong and independent, and that he could give her anything she wanted. They caught the attention of all the guests, but Ellie was worried that this dialogue would upset the Earl's fiancé, which was low of him. My lord's hope of regret in Ellie's eyes vanished after saying that Karp already had a bride and he could gift everyone with her, wishing her a lovely evening, which made the Earl fall even lower, pushing her parents even lower. After all, they had engaged Miss and Karp 10 years ago, but she rejected it. Karp continued his monologue toward the misses about how unnecessary a thing academia is for a woman because after marriage, none of that is necessary. Suddenly, a memory flashed back to her mom telling her that there are many handsome and successful men around, and many of them are much better than this old man. Still, the only reason Ella tolerated Karp is his influence, because her mother always said that the more influential husband, the more opportunities for his wife opens up. After those second thoughts, Ellie decided to harshly point out that his parents had no reason to be proud of such a worthless son, and no matter how many teachers the Earl had had, he had never been taught to think his faith in him was disproportionate to his low intelligence. She went on to add that it was normal not to understand the teacher, but what was really stupid was the inability to realize his shortcomings and try to change them for the better. And in the end, she joked once again that perhaps he would find a mentor equal to himself in intelligence. Karp shrieked indignantly as Ellie dared to deduct grants to him, but she quickly interrupted my lord by correcting grants to grants, since grants are money from the state. Ellie quickly joked that she didn't want to offer monetary aid, but if it was vital to the Earl. The angry my lord asked how dare she speak to him like that, and that she had decided to make him laugh because she thought she was too clever. Ellie didn't care what Karp would do, so exclaimed that he wasn't a threat to her, and at any moment she could leave back to the academy. With a shriek that no one would want Ellie, my lord raised his hand at her and was about to strike her. And just as Miss closed her eyes in fright, my lord's hand was intercepted by someone. Ellie didn't realize who grabbed the Count's hand. It was the Emperor. He asked the Count if he understood who ruled the ball, to which Karp could not answer, asking the Emperor who he was, thus confirming the rumors of his lack of knowledge. Kicking the Count with his foot, the Emperor shrieked, "Who did Karp think he was to cause such trouble at such an event?" Ellie heard the question, but did not understand who said it. But then the Emperor stood in front of her and repeated again, if Miss wanted him to deal with the Count. Ellie was a little shocked when she realized what he was talking about. She asked again who the Emperor wanted to deal with, and he pointed to the Count lying on the floor. Ellie asked how exactly the Emperor wanted to deal with the Count, immediately hearing the answer that it would take 15 seconds, even though there would be bloodshed. But the Miss persuaded her not to do that, because a ball should bring joy, not suffering. Although this did not coincide with the Emperor's views, he gave the Count the opportunity to leave the ball. There was a dialogue between Ellie and the Emperor. He was waiting for her to approach him because they had something to discuss. namely the marriage proposal of Miss for the Emperor. The Emperor smirked, saying about the marriage proposal. Ellie started keeping an imaginary checklist called, "Who is the Emperor's bride?" The first was the location of the action. It was the Emperor's palace, and it was happening. The Emperor set down his mug and said that if he was officially proposed to, he should follow the necessary formalities. He sat in his chair and said that he had to spend taxpayers' money to throw this ball because he couldn't come to the lady's house. But unfortunately, the worthless goon Earl had ruined it all. Second on the list is that the Emperor announced his impending marriage through newspapers. It happened in public. He made it clear to the girl that in any case he would agree to marry her. He asked if she was drunk, but the girl said she was not. But the alcohol was excellent. The Emperor said he suggested she drink tea instead of holding a plate near her face. Ellie was embarrassed and only apologized. And the third is that there is a bride, and it is supposedly her. But it hasn't happened yet. The girl came to the conclusion that the fiancé he keeps mentioning is really her. He sat across from her and asked if she was taking any medication. The girl answered that she was not. The girl was very uncomfortable because her brain is not thinking straight. The Emperor was surprised that today she was quieter than usual, although she had been quite loud that night. She was very embarrassed and apologized for her behavior and asked for a moment to think. The girl was very worried and interrupted the Emperor. He asked if she wanted to discuss the offer she was making here. The Emperor said he had no objections to the engagement, but she probably had them. The Emperor interrogated if she could hear him, because the girl didn't answer or react to him in any way. The girl said that this place was not a good place to discuss such things. The Emperor said to follow him. Ellie thought the Emperor was going to kill her. The hall was indeed very noisy, and no one understood who this woman was and why the Emperor was hanging around with her. Some people thought that this was his fiancée, but at the same time they were misled because the newspaper said that his companion had a very bright hair color, not white. The girl was very ashamed because she thought she had ruined the ball and even harassed the Emperor while drunk. But she began to change her mind that he couldn't just kill her, but there was talk of him killing people against the laws and began to wonder if she should even follow the Emperor. She finally calmed down and accepted that information and thought they were holding their way to the execution site. Ellie apologized once again for doing such a heinous crime. The Emperor only laughed in response. He told her that he wanted to discuss the not-so-boring ones like laws and all those topics she mentioned. The girl was uncomfortable because he was looking at her point blank. His eyes were very sincere. The girl began to ask him why that night when he visited the beer house disguised to him an aristocrat without any manners or pride proposed marriage to him, and he took and agreed. Why did he do that? The Emperor smiled and was glad that their conversation was starting to move to a new level. The girl said that neither she nor he will get any benefit from this marriage because she is not very into politics and her family is quite ordinary. The Emperor scratched his beard and said that the situation was terrible because she first offered him and then refused it herself. The girl corrected him and said that it wasn't that she was rejecting him. She said that she simply advised him to reconsider the decision for the sake of the country's future, and that a lady from a powerful family would be more suitable for the role of empress. She smiled at him and wondered if she was making this offer, it was truly sincere. She thought she had found a gold mine, but it turned out that she had chosen the Emperor himself to flirt with. It would have been a marriage of state had she agreed. The girl said she couldn't approach him and apologized again, telling him to take it as a mistake under the influence of alcohol. She apologized for being rude. The Emperor didn't understand why the mistake and asked if she remembered the events of that night accurately. The girl said she was embarrassed to talk about it, but she said she remembered everything well. Ellie said she really remembered everything, and the fact that she had done such humiliating things was hardly forgettable. Ellie said that those memories had to be filed away, but still she remembered everything. He hesitated, said he had never made inquiries about her family, nor had he ever learned her real name, and asked how he had come to know this information. He didn't wait for her response and said that a large amount of alcohol drunk makes a fool of a man, and added that she even took the hood off him and hugged him, which caused a certain amount of trouble. The Emperor said that a month to prepare should be enough for them, and since the bride would have more to worry about and so they would set a date later in the near future. The girl really was shocked and froze. When she got home, Jerry started asking around to see if Mistress had met anyone there and liked anyone. Ellie, sitting in the bathroom, asked Jerry who she would choose for a pet, not a real obnoxious carp or a wild lion. Jerry answered that she would choose neither because a lion could kill her, and she didn't want to look after a carp either. Ellie asked Jerry where her mother was, and the maid said she was probably looking at portraits. The girl went into the room and asked if she was here. Out of the darkness, her mom answered for Ellie to come in, and she started asking about whether she liked the ball. The girl told me that she was upset because Count Fechida had again confirmed that he was the scum of the human race. The mother joked about their family being flooded with letters from the Fechida family home again tomorrow. Elier asked her mom what she was doing here at such a late hour, and she said she wanted to look at her baby portrait. Mom added that it's too bad that they only have baby portraits, and that she wanted there to be another beautiful portrait of grown-up Ellie before the wedding. Ellie frustratedly asked her mom if she still thought a woman should get married, and her mom proudly replied that she did. Her mom told Ellie not to worry because times are changing, and when she was a kid and took a horse for a ride without asking, Ellie's grandmother spanked her, and now her daughter has 3 degrees. She praised Ellie because even now there are very few women in high positions, but still if the process is accelerated by even one of them, the world will change. Ellie asked if she could accomplish that if she became empress, and her mother only looked surprised and asked again. Ellie replied that she was just saying that, and the emperor had not yet announced the bride's name. Her mother said that she had heard rumors about his marriage, but it was hard to believe that they were true, because even if there was a woman who wanted to marry him, it would be a problem because you would have to be out of your mind to want to marry such a man. Ellie apologized. The emperor lay on the bed and looked at his watch, thinking of Ella, imagining her. She was like the sun to him. He started to close his eyes and realized that he would never again be able to go back to the times when Ellie was so sunny. Ellie says they're definitely getting married and there's no turning back. The man made a slight sound and Ellie asked if he was just sighing or laughing like that. She asked if the idea was so hateful that he sighed so much, and the man replied that it wasn't that. The girl pounded her fist on the door and asked what the problem was. She asked him why he hesitated. They were just getting married, that's all. She told him he could find her at the Eucalyptus house, and that she promised not to pretend they didn't know each other. Alieri said that even if he was a commoner, her status would be enough for both of them. The girl was lying on the bed and remembering these events and thought that it was impossible to think of worse. Suddenly, Jerry shouted for Mrs. Elier to wake up because people from the imperial palace had arrived, and they were sent by His Majesty. The emperor's ambassador was reading a sheet from him. It said that His Majesty and Emperor Rofiers Cathar Esperian would officially marry Lady Eliura Eucalyptus. As such, the imperial family would cover all the expenses of the wedding, and furthermore, it said that His Majesty himself had written the supreme outline and told him to deliver the said message. He said that if they wished, he could give him something. The emperor's servant thought about the fact that he had known this girl since childhood and she was famous for her intelligence, but there were no other features about her. So why did he choose her? Elier stood with this sheet in her hands and read while Jerry and her mom were in complete shock. She wondered what the budget would be because it didn't say, and asked if the servant knew how much an imperial wedding cost. The man asked her what she meant. She asked what kind of things they had brought here that were unlikely to do her any service after the wedding. The girl said that she only needed a wedding dress and that they should not exceed the allocated budget for their wedding, so they should not spend more than necessary. The girl's mother apologized to the ambassador because she had just now learned the news, and that is why she had such inappropriate behavior. Ellie turned toward her mom and saw that she was very angry. The male ambassador provided bodyguards and said that since she would become Empress, His Majesty had personally chosen her bodyguards, and from today, these knights would protect her. But the girl interrupted him and said that she was very grateful for his attention, but asked that the bodyguards should begin their duties tomorrow. He said that they could not because they had been given that order, but she said that His Majesty would surely understand everything if they said. That was her request. All this the girl said because she didn't want the bodyguards to hear her tell her mother that she had proposed to the emperor when she was drunk. She remembered how she had grabbed him by the collar and proposed marriage. She told him to tell the emperor that she was very pleased with the conversation that evening, and the man replied that since she so desired, he would accept all her wishes. He and his mother were reading the newspaper, in which a new article had been written about how, in disguise, His Majesty had gone to town and met a lady who was suffering from a broken heart, and while he was helping her to heal her wounds, love had blossomed between them. The girl thought how romantic it was and how nice it would be if the newspaper came before the people from the palace. Her mother said that her father would be home soon after lunch from their land, and when he heard the news, he would probably faint from shock. Her mother was very angry with her daughter because she didn't even share it with her right after she returned from the ball, and the girl said that this engagement was quite sudden and she didn't want to tell right away. The girl really had no idea that the emperor would find in her humiliating behavior a share of romance and publish the story as an article. She told her mom that her fiancé was the emperor himself and asked if she was still angry with her. Mother replied that she was not angry and that she was quite happy that she was getting married. Mother said that the wedding was in a month and they had a lot of work to do to make the guest list. Eliar asked why her mother didn't look so happy her daughter was marrying the man who had the highest position and the most power in the entire empire in his hands. She wished that for her, didn't she? Mom said that she was worried because marriages between nobles can be broken and that even if the husband's family is more powerful than them, they would have to suffer some losses. On the other hand, they have no choice but to obey the order of the imperial family. Mother said that she knows that Ellie isn't interested in gossip, but rumors about the current emperor must have reached her and that the newspapers describe the story as romantic. But if any of the things in them aren't true, then it's no good. Mother is just very worried lest her daughter have a hard time with him not only as his wife, but also as the empress. The girl thought about it and realized that her mother was right and the imperial marriage was no laughing matter. She couldn't even believe that she had succumbed to the influence of the moment and accepted the fact that she was marrying the emperor. She realized that their story is far from what is described in novels, and she doesn't know why he used her drunken antics as an excuse to marry her, and yet if he is a tyrant. Ellie replied that she understood why her mother was concerned, but the emperor she knew would not look down on her just because she was a woman. The girl decides that she too wants to see this through and marry him. He's better than Fachida anyway. Her mom agreed with her feelings and said she would understand her anyway. The girl realized that her mother wasn't happy, but Ellie was very happy because her mom respects her opinion. That couldn't help but make her happy. Ellie decided to go to her room and told her mom that she would go back to her room. Her mom told her that this was not the time to rest. Mom talked about how they had to prepare for the wedding somehow. They couldn't leave the manor because the villagers had already found out about the engagement and would be running around trying to find out anything they could about the family. Mother said that Ellie would be the object of their interest because she's the emperor's bride, and luckily she's smart and will survive somehow. For example, by reading books for a month. After all, she needs to be the emperor's educated wife, and by reading more books she will become even smarter. Her mom told her to prepare for the wedding by reading books. The daughter ranted about the timing of the wedding requiring research and a thesis. Her mother also joked that they would have to call a doctor because her father would faint from the shock, and that they would also look for experienced seamstresses, and when the bodyguards arrived, they would visit all the boutiques. Meanwhile, in the emperor's palace, the ambassador had already returned and told the emperor that Lady Eucalyptus was very pleased with the conversation, and she said that she wanted the bodyguards to perform their duties tomorrow. The emperor agreed and said that it was up to her discretion. The emperor told his juror to multiply all the calculations by 3 before telling the girl, because she is a rather curious person. The knight began to report to the emperor everything he knew about Count Fechida. He told him that after the scandal Count Fechida had caused at the ball, the bride's family had sent a letter canceling the engagement, and with some delay, the Fechida family announced that the second son had become the family's heir instead of the count. But there's a problem. The count has escaped, but he's already being sought and hasn't been caught yet. The knights almost caught him, but he disappeared into the crowd again. They tried to find him quickly so that they wouldn't be killed for poor performance. Count Fechida was very angry because it was all because of the know-it-all girl. He was angry not only at the girl but also at his brother because the brat said that he was helping him as his brother for the last time and advised him to run away. Fechida was furious. The count decided that he would kill every last one of them and first deal with the wench who had always despised him. He wanted to do everything he could to give her a humiliating and painful death. The emperor thought that he should have dealt with this man at once, because fools like him would never realize what parasites they were to society. He should have killed him right there. The emperor just didn't want to scare Elier. She wouldn't have married him after that. He ordered his servants to find him quickly and bring the fool to him alive. At that time, the count thought about how arrogant his ex-wife was and how she dared to humiliate him. He vowed that he would not let it go. The emperor was worried she might be disappointed in him if she found out. But the emperor decided that if a man, after all the chances given to him, does not change at all for the better, he does not deserve to exist in this world. He was worried he'd frighten Elier. As summer approached, the flowers in the garden were very beautiful. The desserts were so good that it was a pity to eat them, and the man who sat in front of her was also beautiful. The emperor asked her how the wedding preparations were going, and if everything was in order or if she needed anything else. Very embarrassed, Ellery replied that he had already presented so much and that she didn't need anything else. The girl was pleased, but she didn't feel like having fun and enjoying it all. She wondered why the emperor had called her here. The emperor asked if she liked the tea. The girl replied that the tea was just fine, but the emperor was surprised because she hadn't even touched the cup once since she arrived. He asked me if she was feeling ill, but she said she was fine. And actually, Elle was tired because she'd been writing wedding invitations all night and now her wrist hand was just falling off. Her mother was very pleased that His Majesty had invited her daughter to the palace and asked her not to do anything stupid. The girl thought that it made no difference why the emperor had called her there and that she should stop forgetting her head with this. The girl said that she was afraid that she would be embarrassed if she didn't fit into her dress before the wedding ceremony. The emperor only calmly replied that she shouldn't worry about her figure. Ellie saw that he was very clever and knew how to flatter a woman. The girl was worried and afraid that she was taking up too much of his time. But the man calmly replied that the period of their engagement was short enough and the wedding would take place soon. So it was all right. He thought that usually this time should be used to get to know each other better. The girl realized that he wasn't as simple as the rumor said. Ellie told him that she had a question for him, or more likely a request. The man asked how he could help. The girl said it was all about Sir Balti. This is the emperor's personal night. The emperor asked the girl why this was so. The man was worried about whether he was doing his job well. The girl replied that all was well in Balti's service. It's just that they weren't even married yet, and she was already being guarded by the emperor's personal knight. That seems excessive. The girl just felt uncomfortable standing out with this knight and his uniform. Ellie was very embarrassed when Sir Balti knelt down and said that he had sworn his life to her and would defend her to the last. The girl tried to make his life more comfortable in every possible way. She told him not to stand all the time, that he could sit down, and he obediently did his job. He said that if he embarrassed her with his presence, he would minimize the feeling. The girl had said that even the uniform itself was too conspicuous. The emperor replied that he would fulfill the girl's request, but not now because they had some sort of problem. He asked if she had heard any news about the Fetcheda house. Ellie replied that she had heard something. She said that she knew that the second son had been announced as the heir and that Kark might be a fool, but his family was in the business of trading, and if they weighed the pros and cons, they had made the right choice in preferring the fool to the second son. It had been a long time since her engagement had been broken off, and she said she didn't know the details. The emperor said the fool she calls a Karp escaped when he ordered his arrest. The girl was very surprised and asked again. The ruler said that he did, but that the news had not yet been made public. The emperor also added that to celebrate their marriage, he had reduced taxes and increased the subsidy for the poorer districts, and now the entire capital was celebrating the imperial wedding. So now was not the time to make a statement that would ruin the atmosphere of the celebration. He's also increased security at the border for anyone intending to leave. Ellie asked what crime he'd committed that he was wanted. The girl wondered how it happened because Karp was not smart enough to do something like that, but apparently he had evaded a significant amount of tax on one of his trade cases or smuggled a large amount of illegal products into the country, and it seemed that the subject had a certain propensity to commit illegal acts. The emperor believed that he hadn't escaped from the capital because the guards are reinforced and check everyone who wants to leave, so the count is most likely still hiding in the city. He added that Ellie was about to become empress, and who knows how this goon would try to hurt her. The emperor said that Balti was one of the most trustworthy knights, so he sent him to protect her. The girl realized that he had deliberately told him to wear that uniform. Ellie asked what would happen if this count was caught. The emperor said that under normal circumstances, he would be held accountable under the current law. But this subject has the nerve to hide now, so the measures will be harsher, and it depends on his mood, because he can afford to punish him more severely. The girl decided not to ask any more questions. Ellie was approached by her bodyguard and told that it was time for them to go and asked if he could accompany her. The girl thanked him, and they went on their way. Ellie questioned Sir Balti on how he liked the emperor as a man. Balti hesitated and said he was a good man. Madame asked if the emperor had any hobbies, but Balti said none. The girl found this conversation awkward, and it reminded her of the time I had to squeeze out a compliment to an academy professor. Balt praised the emperor and said that he was very strong, and no one had yet managed to defeat him in battle. He admired his actions in the Kuro Mountains. Ellie realized that he liked the emperor after all. The lady asked if Balti had been on an expedition to the Western Mountains with him, and he said he had. Only the emperor was younger than he was, but his skill was superior, and it was truly impressive. He added that if it hadn't been for the emperor, their demon extermination expedition would not have been successful. The emperor was indeed a fine fighter, because a fine fighter like Balti spoke of him with such strong respect. If he was a narcissistic egomaniac, he wouldn't have led the Knights of Steel into a dangerous place. That's why the emperor is a role model. The girl remembered again his image of a tyrant and thought that perhaps he would marry her to try to get rid of his image. But she stopped thinking that because although she was uncomfortable, he did not ask her any rude questions and was very reasonable. The girl was very curious which side of him was real and who to believe. The emperor stood looking out the window. Ellie stood looking out the window. The man screamed that he couldn't. He couldn't steal a nobleman's daughter because she wasn't a commoner, and security in the capital had been beefed up. The count was angry and shouted back that he was just a small-time hack for hire and had nothing to fear. The count threw more money on the table. To be sure, he doubled the original sum for stealing the girl. The man reflected that with that kind of money, he could be out of work for months. So the man decided to ask the count if he could guarantee that nothing would happen to him. The count, of course, replied that everything would be fine because her family was not that powerful, and that he only wanted to teach her a lesson for getting on his nerves. He said all he had to do was stop the crew at the specified location. The count threatened him not to say anything to anyone, because he would kill him before anyone knew about it. Said he had a special weapon. The knight was talking to my lady about what he had heard that she would be traveling to try on her wedding dress. He said that a lot of foreigners had come to the capital and it was particularly crowded, and so security was tightened up quite a bit. But since anything could happen, they'd better be home by dinner time. But if she had any business that he wasn't aware of, he'd appreciate it if she told him. Jerry brushed the mistress' hair, and the latter turned to Balti. She said that although he had to guard her and was here for a reason, it was not his job to know her schedule. Sir was frightened and asked if he had inconvenienced the lady, but the girl happily said that she was very grateful to him for his hard work. She was just sorry to wear him out and bother him. Sir Balti began to explain to Mistress Irili that it was his duty to know her full schedule for the day in order to scrupulously carry out his task of protecting my lady. Jerry whispered in her mistress's ear a question about whether it was possible to put down an imperial knight for smiling. She blushed and said she didn't think it was possible because there were no such laws. Suddenly, a memory came to mind of the emperor saying that the knight would guard the girl until the wedding, just so she could act like he wasn't even there. He had assured her that the knight would be quiet and inconspicuous, but according to the emperor, he can still fire for smiling. While Ellie was flying at her memories, Balti said he would have the coachman bring the carriage to the door. Ellie had accepted that Balti would be with her and was beginning to get used to him. But she was beginning to think that Sir Balti himself didn't want to guard her because she didn't have the proper status. She hurried to get there faster and not be seen because she was now in everyone's ear. Carp hasn't been caught yet, and she has to bear it and smile. Balti noticed that this coachman was new and he didn't know him. He asked the fellow who he was, and the fellow said that the previous one was sick and he was replacing him today. The knight asked if the guy even knew who he was taking and added that if he told anyone, he'd be in trouble. The male coachman realized that the count had lied to him about the fact that the girl's family was not influential, and that this was the future empress, and if something went wrong with the kidnapping, he would be finished. Jerry was already anxious to see Mistress dress and asked if she was interested, and Mistress replied that she had already tried on his previous version. The knight helped the girl into the carriage and said that he would ride in the next carriage. The girl thanked the sir. She thought that everyone would be shocked and would not even risk getting close. Meanwhile, the coachman was thinking about what trouble he would get into and making a plan on how he would get rid of the maid and run off with my lady. Mistress rejoiced, for Jerry took particular pleasure in it all. When the girl tried on her dress, the maid was absolutely delighted, and the woman who made the dress asked how she was, if she had any discomfort or wanted to make any adjustments. The girl was very beautiful in the dress and said that she did not know what dresses were in fashion. She asked the woman who made the dress not to address her as if she were already an empress. The woman only said that the wedding would take place soon, so there was nothing wrong with it. The girl started to worry because she thought the dress was too fancy. The jewelry was made inconspicuous as she asked, but it was an imperial wedding, so Ellie was advised to make the dress more luxurious. This dress definitely looked like a wedding dress. Ellie was beginning to realize that she was indeed going to marry the emperor of this country. The girl was glad to see that Jerry was very happy, but in a moment she was sad, for she realized that when she married, she would never see her again. The girl wanted to ask the dressmaker something, and the latter gladly said she would answer. She whispered in the woman's ear and said she would pay extra for it herself. The tailor said that the lady is very kind and she is looking forward to the wedding reception. The tailor said that the size was appropriate and nothing needed to be changed, only she would add some jewelry to match the necklace given by the emperor. At that time, the knight was waiting for them at the entrance. The tailor said goodbye to the girl and said that she was very pleased that the emperor's wife herself was a customer of their boutique, and added that by the time of the wedding to make changes in the dress will not be easy, so the lady will have to try to maintain the figure as much as possible. The girl thought about the fact that Portnea was being very polite, but was actually telling her not to gain weight. The girl said goodbye. Ellie saw a lot of people looking at her, but it was natural, and she decided to hurry back home like Sir Balthi had told her to. Suddenly, the girl saw the count in the distance. Memories from that ball came over her, and he quickly hid. The girl exclaimed that she saw Count Fakida. Balthi said he'd be right back. He went to check around the corner, but he saw that the place was empty, and with buildings like this, it was impossible to hide or escape so quickly. Knight Balti approached the girl and said that for her safety, they had better leave for the manor quickly. The girl replied that she didn't mind, but asked if he had seen anyone. Balti said that he had not seen anyone, and that it was difficult to hide here if one was not trained to do so. The girl apologized and said that her imagination must have been running wild. Balti reassured the woman and said that if she had a sense of danger, it was not unreasonable to exercise caution. The coachman said he was holding his way back to the estate. Meanwhile, the girl thought about the fact that the count had never been trained in any martial arts, and it was far more likely that a more powerful family had sent a man after her. Fakida's ring glittered a lot. The count only thought about how he would take revenge on the girl because she was unworthy of becoming empress. Jerry was very happy because she really liked the way the dress looked on her mistress. She said that she would look very elegant next to the emperor. Ellie was very pleased that Jerry was so excited. The maid began to say that if Mistress married the earl, the girl would have to beat her chest in despair every day, and she would have to comfort Mistress every time, and also take care of a child that looked like the earl. Ellie was pleased that Jerry thought as she did. Jerry was talking about what would happen when the mistress moved to the palace, and they were abruptly interrupted by a sudden jerk. The carriage came to an abrupt halt. Jerry asked if Mistress was okay. She said she was fine and asked how Jerry was feeling. Mistress didn't realize what had happened, and suddenly there was a knock on her door. It was a knight. He asked if the lady was all right. The girl did not answer, only asked what had happened. Knight replied that they were having trouble with the wheels and would probably have to launch a flare It was getting dark and it was dangerous outside. Balti said that no one should leave the crew. Ellie was puzzled because back in the morning the wheel was fine. Balti said he thought it was suspicious too. Balti placed the signaling tool and knife in the girl's hands. Balti said he'd hoped nothing bad would happen, but they'd better be careful after the recent incident. Balti said that no one should worry, because the nights were near and they should hurry to signal. He went to ask Kuchera what was wrong with the wheel and added that he had warned him to be extra careful because of the importance of the passenger. Balti was firing a flare, but suddenly the Count jumped on the knight from behind. Sir spotted him at the last moment.
Meanwhile, in the carriage, Jerry was telling Mistress that she sensed that something was wrong, and that if the wheel was broken, they should hear them trying to fix it. Ellie said that the girl was right, and that after the flare was fired, the real thing had quieted down. And given Sir Balthi's temper, he would have let them know by now if everything was all right. The girl thought that even if they were attacked, they couldn't even hear the noise of fighting. It was very strange. Ellier was fixing her hair and said realistically it was too quiet. She told the girl to take one of the flares and use it in case of anything to defend herself, because Sir Balti would have warned them long ago that all was well, and he was still gone. Suddenly, someone knocked and asked the lady to step out for a moment. She and Jerry asked who it was, and the voice said that it was the coachman, and that the knight had asked them to get out of the carriage. But the girls did not believe him, for the voice was quite different from that of the morning. Suddenly, Jerry shouted for that voice to stop lying to them, and that if all was well, Balti would have told them long ago that it was safe outside. Jerry whispered to Mistress to let her hair down and take the knife and flares because they were in danger. Suddenly, the carriage doors swung open and the Earl stood behind them. He said that there was always so much noise from Ellie and that they should have come out when asked. Jerry began to back up Mistress with her. Fekida introduced himself. He pulled Jerry's hair to get her away from Mistress. He threw her into the street. Earl said he was pissed off at Ellie and pulled her by the arm. Mistress screamed in pain, and he yelled at her that she had made him a laughingstock. Ellie thought that it was very strange that Fekida was so strong that he had defeated an imperial knight. She was very worried about Jerry. The girl told Fekida that he was wanted and saw the way Jerry was tied up by coachmen. She realized that they were in cahoots, and Fekida paid him off. The girl told him that it was too stupid a reason to kill her, and he got even more angry and yelled that because of her, he was now not left heir to the family. The girl was in a lot of pain because he was squeezing her hand very hard. She asked her why before he was replaced. The girl quickly realized that her other hand was free. Ellie started to pull out a knife. She began to remember Jerry's caring words about keeping the knife with Mistress because she was more important than the average maid. The lady reassured herself that someone should show up soon after Balthi's signal. But Fekida kept shouting at her and accusing her of driving him out of his own family. He humiliated her in various ways. Ellie was very worried about Jerry because she had given the knife to Mistress and she was unprotected. Mistress was uneasy because if someone came to help, Jerry's safety would be put lower than the life of the Emperor's wife. The girl decided that she would not let that happen. Ellie asked what her fault was in this situation with the Count. He said that she was the one who had destroyed everything. But the girl, meanwhile, had already pulled out a knife. She shouted at him how dare he accuse her of what he had destroyed himself. And she stabbed him in the arm. He started yelling how dare she lunge at him with a knife, and Ellie started running away. The Count's ring glowed, and he became very angry. Karp shouted that he would surely finish her off. Ellie, meanwhile, was already running through the bushes. The girl ran, Fekida yelling after her that he would finish her off. It was hard for Ellie to run because she was wearing shoes. A man was chasing her. He shouted something after her, and Ellie thought about how she would never have known how uncomfortable dresses could be if it hadn't been for the chase story. The girl thought about how she should have spent more time practicing. The man chased the girl angrily. Veins popped out all over his body from anger, and he taunted her, shouting at her to run away because he enjoyed it. The girl was very scared. Suddenly, the girl hit a dead end and realized that she had to take whatever action she could. Ellie pulled a flare out of her dress, lit it, and told him that he was very pathetic because the suffering of others gave him pleasure. The signal from the missile flew into the sky. Fekshida asked if she was done with her toys and added that she wasn't worthy of being so arrogant in front of him. Elier only told him that even if he killed her, he would be captured almost immediately by the knights. He said he didn't care and grabbed the girl by the neck. The count squeezed her neck harder and harder. He said that she would not die a normal death, that he wanted her to suffer. She asked him again if it was all because of his conviction that she had done it. He raised his hand at the girl and told her to shut up.